Yo, hello, how does it go? We're out here, and today I wanted to discuss slash tell the story of how we may only grow and change and become when we allow ourselves and put ourselves in situations and belief systems that are different than the ones that have kept us restricted. Simply, what I mean is that you cannot heal in the same place that made you sick. I'm not sure where that quote originates from, but it's an extremely powerful one. And this has been it has been a powerful realization and experience in my life. I have experienced leaving my comfort zone. I have experienced leaving my home, what is familiar, to find myself, to heal myself, to change myself, to become myself. And really, it's not always going to happen in the most pretty way. Every single time that I've left to find myself, well, let me just get personal. I have 3 different experiences that were very vital in my life, to where I began to see transformation within myself. I allowed myself space to breathe and to create who I am, rather than replaying and fulfilling the comfortability of my old self, meaning going to the same job, being a people pleaser, doing whatever they asked me to do, whether it was my family. I grew up in a religion called Mormonism. If you've ever heard of it, then you know it's a very deep religion. It's very, especially I live here in Utah, where 50% of the state of the population is Mormon. And so it is a lifestyle, and for me to have removed myself from that was a very difficult thing in my life, but it was very empowering, and it was a very empowering experience. And so that was probably the first major shift of getting outside of my comfort zone, out of what made me sick. And I had great parents who loved me and did the best that they could, better than so many other people get in this life, in their childhood. And so that just makes me have lots of compassion, because even with these caring parents and the abundant life that I had, there were still other things that caused me to get sick in this world. Sick in the mind, that is ultimately what is sick, and in the body. Our bodies are also very sick, even if we might be used to our body's sickness and our mind's sickness, so that we don't realize that our mind is sick. We don't realize that our body is sick, because we are used to it. But this was when I first started stepping away from this religion. It was really after I graduated. I stopped really being in it when I was in high school, but it wasn't until I officially declared it until after I graduated. That's when I finally felt safe, or basically safe enough to expose that to my parents. Before I kind of faked it my whole high school life, that I was still this Mormon person. And it was shortly after that where I began kind of trying new things. I began self-improvement. I began I took a couple college classes. I dropped out of both of them my first semester, but I tried it. And I also later started trying marijuana, which was this was a huge awareness shift for me, not just because of the effects of marijuana, but because of my shift with it. My idea of marijuana before was so skewed and so ignorant. It was ignoring. I was ignoring what marijuana would actually do, and I was seeing marijuana smokers and marijuana in general as what my ego mind had presented it to be, which is what my parents and society told me, that it was bad. Within the religion, it was really bad. Like I had concern that it may be evil or will completely ruin your life, and things like that. And so it was when I did that, I started having these new thoughts, new ways of seeing things when I smoked marijuana. This was about the same time I started practicing meditation as well. All these things were kind of a spiral effect of my awareness was shifting. And as your awareness shifts, it's like that graph. It's like it's like once you really grasp what awareness is, it's like your life just shifts up and up and up and up exponentially. That was the word I was thinking of, exponentially. And so I started having these marijuana experiences, and it wasn't just the marijuana experiences I was having, it was all the experiences I was having. Marijuana was just tied in with it, but there was times where I started going to the mountains by myself, and I'd never been to the mountains by myself. You could barely get me to go to the mountains by forcing me. If you ask my parents or anyone very familiar with me when I was younger, they would tell you how much I hated nature. And my dad or my mom would pull over sometimes and be like, hey, look at the view. And I would be like, I don't care. I don't want to look at the view. I got my phone. And so, really this first awakening of leaving this Mormon church was really the breaking down of these massive programs in my life. These massive programs of thinking that life is about validation, thinking that society is good or normal just because it's what is here. But I began to start seeing through things and started making judgments for myself. Started saying, wait a second, McDonald's is the biggest business in the world. 1 billion served, I think is what it says on their damn sign. And that is not in best interest of our health or in the sustainability of our planet. Among many other things, it's affecting our brain and our gut. And so I began to start seeing through these things, and not just acknowledging it, but like also like seeing it with awareness, like, whoa, as long as I play into these systems, I am part of the system. And so I started making changes in my life, like foods I was eating, and this was the first transformation in my life, because I was putting myself in new situations. And I believe that this is the beginning of awakening, is putting yourself in new environments. And that's what all three of these, I guess you could say, stories or experiences that I had are. They are different experiences or different settings I am putting myself in, different places, environments. First starting, I didn't actually leave my physical home. I was in the same home at the beginning of this awakening, but I was putting myself in new environments in the sense that I was actually kind of changing the environment I was going to and how I was going to it. So it's like I was waking up in the same house, my parents' house, my mom's house, and I remember one of the earliest memories I remember of putting myself in a new environment was I went in my closet. I had this closet where the light didn't even work, so I barely even used it. I didn't even really hang clothes up in there. I did sometimes, but I went in that closet one day and I locked myself in it and I meditated. It was one of the first times I ever meditated, because I was told that I needed to be in a dark room with like no distractions. That's what I was instructed. I don't even remember the YouTube video. It wasn't by any guru or anything. It was by I think it was by some guy who was teaching people how to pick up girls. And so that is how I very first actually started practicing meditation. I had heard of it, but I didn't really even know what it was. But the way this guy explained it was so simple that I was like, I could try that and see what happens. He just told me to sit down and focus on my breathing, and that whatever thoughts come, that to just kind of let them be there, look at them, breathe to them, to give more of my attention and focus to my breath rather than the actual thought that is there. And so that was the first way I changed my environment, was actually changing the way I presented myself in the environment and where I was in the environment. I never went in my closet in my room, but it was always there. I could have been meditating in there for years. And I was also putting myself in new environments just where I was. I was in Utah working this job. I had no expectation of quitting this job. I had saved tons of money. I thought the purpose of life was to get money, to get rich, before my awakening. And so I had this job, and I had just this rigidness of, this is what I'm doing. I'm working here. But even then I kind of started changing my environment. I would still go to work and everything, but before work I would start going to the mountains and stuff, like I was saying, and this was just bringing massive awareness and change to me, because I wasn't distracting myself in my time. I was doing things that felt purposeful, and when I wasn't being purposeful, I was being introspective. Like when I was in the mountains, I was either reading or writing, and if I wasn't, then I was meditating. I was asking myself questions. I was very curious at the time about myself and the world. I was so open-minded. That was a theme word for me in this first stage, was open-mindedness about myself and the world. And so then my second experience started with more darkness. So this first experience was excitement. The first stage was excitement. It was discovery. I was seeing through myself and what I had been programmed to believe. But then the second, with this brightness came a light onto kind of my darkness or my insecurities, my unconsciousness, things that I have not solved in my life, kind of talking about the negative side effects of the way that I was growing up and the way my life went. I was insecure about my body. I was very short. I did not feel confident around women, but I had friends and stuff who were talking to lots of women. They were having sex, and I had never had sex before. And so there was all these insecurities that started coming up within me. And kind of with these realizations, though, was still a lot of that brightness at the time. I was still just very curious and just learning a lot about life every single day. And I'm still learning a lot about life every single day. That excitement doesn't leave unless we let it leave. But in the second stage is where I started to kind of stop resonating with the things before. And that's why a lot of my darkness came up as well, as I wasn't resonating with my friends as much. I was not even resonating with my family. I was kind of really isolating myself a lot, because I was starting to feel one, people didn't really understand me, but also that certain things were starting to annoy me and bring darkness out of me. The television would very much annoy me, construction noises. I just kind of started to realize how loud and unconscious we are of things, because I was becoming so aware of everything, and there's a lot of this world that is not aware. And this is kind of where my spiritual ego also was very much present, because I was believing that I was better than these people, I was more advanced, while I may have been seeing things that they were unconscious of. But what I wasn't acknowledging is that there were people who were seeing unconsciousness within me as well. So I was really looking outside rather than within, and this is when I began to leave. There was this girl that I had strong feelings for, and she very much helped spark my spiritual awakening. She actually was in that certain friend group that I had. She moved away to Arizona at the beginning of her spiritual awakening, and then she kind of came back when I started having my spiritual awakening, and it didn't work out. She ended up dating this other person. Like I said, I was very unconfident at the time. I didn't really stand a chance. And so, because in not being confident myself, it's not that we need to fake confidence. It was that, for me, I was not being vulnerable with myself. I think something that I have learned along the way is that it was never that I needed more confidence or like power or anything like that. That actually was already very natural to me. It was that I didn't have confidence and strength in my vulnerability, in my trueness. So yeah, I was like, really a lot of my programming was in relation to needing to be perfect. And when it comes to intimate and relationships in general, being perfect is not possible. And so getting into a relationship, I kind of self-sabotaged myself because this was a way of avoiding myself needing to become vulnerable. And so after that happened, the day that she told me that she was actually dating this other person, I very much reacted. And the next morning, I bought a van. Or I started looking for a van, but I also bought the van the same day I started looking for a van. And I had this crazy experience of putting myself again in this new circumstance where I hopped on this bus and I took it all the way to Ogden, which is this northern city in Utah that I had never been to before. I'd heard of it, but just never been there. If you know Post Malone, he's from Ogden, Utah, so it's somewhat recognizable. We out here in Utah. But yeah, I took the bus out there, but not only that, I then the point was to take this bus to Ogden, and then that there would be this other bus that I would hop on in Ogden that would take me all the way to Idaho. So this was like a 200, 300 mile journey I took in this day, completely on bus without driving, where I was just trusting that this van would work and it would be able to take me back home. That was my plan. I didn't really plan that well. I did plan. I had this in mind. I had this structure, but I didn't really plan for anything wrong to happen. I planned for everything to go right. I didn't expect anything to go right, but I did just have trust and went with it. And I believe that that's why this experience manifested for me, is I wasn't really attaching. I was going with the flow. And this was a new environment for me because, again, I had felt like I was just doing so many repeated things in my life and doing what felt comfortable. But this felt very uncomfortable. I hadn't even ever bought in a car from somebody, like through the contract and all that, the bill of sale. So this was all kind of me just trying to do it on my own without someone there to help me. And it ended up working out. I ended up getting the van. It was a divine experience. The bus in Ogden ended up not being there, and I ended up just getting a ride from this dude. It was an Uber. It cost a lot of money, but like I ended up talking the people down for the van, a couple $100 down. So I got this van for $800 and a $100 Uber. So this was $900 I just spent, and I got this van, and I did this whole process pretty quickly. This was all within a couple weeks. I quit my job. I had this powerful mushroom trip. It was my first time experiencing with psychedelics. This was all happening around the same time. Within a few months of my first time trying weed and trying mushrooms, this was all within probably 5 months. And this was all the beginning of my awakening. It felt like the first 5 months of my life had been more significant, or the first 5 months of this awakening had felt more significant than the first 19 years of my life. And I ended up moving into this van. I took the seats out and I sold everything that I had. I got rid of all these things I had. I cut myself down to like 10 pairs of clothes. I started practicing minimalism. That was an important thing at the beginning of my journey as well. And the rest is history, man. I mean, I traveled everywhere in that van. I would never be able to get into all the experiences I had in one video. I'm writing a book. I guess I'll just say that. I'm not trying to hide it or anything, but I'm not sure when that will be done. I write 1 page per day, at least, but I'm writing about all my experiences I've had through traveling, but just every day was an uncomfortable situation. It was a new experience, a new place. It completely rewired my brain. It freed me from the world I was born into and who I was expected to be by society, by my parents. It was the first time in my life I had felt free. It was the first time I felt in my life that I wasn't living for survival, but that I was living to be alive, to experience, to have joy. And I believe that this was this move from purely root chakra to my sacral chakra. To me, it felt like I hit enlightenment, but I probably just got into my second chakra energy. And so, but it did rewire my brain. It completely exponentialized, I love that word right now, my growth. It's like you can see people do everything the same for so long and they live their whole life the same. Me, since I started putting myself in these new environments, it's like I trained my mind, or I gave myself this light that will always be there, that I know that I can always come back to excitement, to joy, to adventure. It's like that will never leave me. Don't get me wrong, I have times where life starts to feel repeated. It has been for the last couple months. I've been working this job, trying to build a foundation for myself. And it began to feel repeated, it began to feel limiting. But that's why I'm so excited right now, is I'm coming back to that joy and excitement, because it always comes back in the right seasons. When we are ready, when we choose, essentially. And so, after I traveled in the van, I once came back to Utah. I did the whole West Coast from Canada all the way down to California. I did all those states, that entire West Coast. It was beautiful, amazing, and the experiences are just untradeable. But after that, I actually went back to Utah. I had this divine sign that told me I needed to go back to Utah. And that's kind of where I get into the third shift in my life, is I kind of realized that I did need to come back to Utah, which is my home state, where I am from, because there are certain things that I need to continue to face. And I'm sure I could have faced these things wherever I am, wherever I was. But coming home really would speed this growth up, because I would be facing these things every day, coming back to my family and seeing the habits that they're still living in these same programs, not just my family, but society, my friends, and that people weren't growing at the same speed as I was. And so this was reflecting me something completely different. It's like I would go out and travel, and this would reflect me all this very masculine energies, adventure, power, strength, and things like that. And then I would come back and I would be reflected these very feminine things like forgiveness, patience, acceptance, things like that. And so then my third journey in the spiritual awakening, and this is just 3 random parts I broke it up into. It could have been broken into different parts. I mean, you know what I'm saying? There's awakening after awakening, but these are 3 main ones I wanted to explain today. The third one was when I had come back from all my van travels. I did one other van journey as well. I did the West Coast. I also did the East Coast, which again, the East Coast gave me a completely different awareness shift. and different memories as well. There there's no one without the other. They both taught me completely different things, but same amount of meaningful. Um, but then after the van life, I had a long period of time of darkness when I came back to Utah from the East Coast, and um, I didn't really have any sense of purpose, but I also didn't really feel like being in the system of working for these companies who just care about money and things like that. So I was kind of like in this middle ground where I didn't know myself enough to have purpose. That was ultimately what it was. Is I didn't I didn't know that I didn't know myself, but it's pretty obvious because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And if I knew who I was, I would know what I am doing. I would know what I want to do. I would know why I am here. But I didn't understand that at the time. But in divine timing, my van was hit by a drunk driver while I was sleeping in it. Long story short, that gave me a bunch of money that I didn't expect to believe. That van didn't even work, so it was almost a blessing that I got hit because I would have gotten no money for it because it was broken. But I was able to. Then I moved into my dad's house. Then divinely, I was kicked out of my dad's house. They thought I was smoking weed. I was not smoking weed, although I have nothing against weed. I was lighting sage, and so the sage was so divine that my stepmom thought it was weed, and she decided to kick me out. And before I could even remember or acknowledge that it was the sage and not the weed, we batted heads enough that I didn't want to live there anymore. She didn't want me to live there, whether it was weed or not. And so I left that night at like 2 or 3 in the morning. She kicked me out. I picked up all my stuff. My dad said, "No, spend the night. You can leave in the morning." And they went upstairs, and then I snuck out the window because I was mad. I wasn't even that mad though. I was just like kind of just like prideful in a way. Like I was like, I don't want to be somewhere that people don't want me. It wasn't even just my pride. It was just like that energy. I didn't want to be there. I don't want to be somewhere where I'm not appreciated. You know what I mean? And I don't even hold any resentment towards my stepmom for that, because honestly, it was divine. It was divine that this happened because I was not appreciating myself in this environment. So I wasn't leaving room for them to appreciate me. And so I left that night, and I woke up in the morning and I said, I'm going to Hawaii. I'd always wanted to go to Hawaii. I had even thought about going much in the past, but I always ended up canceling or backing out. And this time it was divine. And this time it felt I was running away from certain things. I was obviously running away from these family issues. But if I've learned anything, it is that even in my running away, I am still being blessed and right where I need to be. Because going to Hawaii, again, put me in this new environment and new experiences that I cannot be any more grateful for. Living in Hawaii, I found a part of myself that is my soul. I was shown how everything was connected. The right people were sent to me. I can't begin to explain how grateful I am for the spirit and for aloha, because so many wrong things could have happened when I lived in Hawaii. I very first moved there, I got off the plane and I just started walking, and as soon as I kind of got out of the airport walking place and like where I could see like the land and the city, I saw this big green mountain, huge green mountain in Maui, Hawaii. And I said, there. I knew instantly that that is where I needed to go. And it looked pretty far away. It was probably about 10 miles I walked that day. And I ended up just sleeping in that forest that night. bunch of other things happened. I mean, that's Hawaii. Everything's gonna happen every day. But I'm gonna do a little bit of movement for a sec while I tell this story. Okay, actually, I don't need to do movement. I just needed to do that. But I lived in that mountain for about half the time I lived in Hawaii. So this was a couple months that I lived in this mountain. Just a hammock and a backpack full of clothes and my journal and a book. And every day was something. I mean, I would try to pick up trash whenever I could. I would talk to the locals, try and meet people. I just did whatever. And I had some money saved up, so I didn't get a job. But I tried to give money to the land. Not that that's the best offering. I believe that my offering of picking up garbage was probably what kept me safe in Hawaii. I believe that that's why I was accepted by the land. I saw how the people even just living there weren't even taking care of their own island. And many of them were, but I really saw how that if you're traveling, or at least when I'm traveling, be of service to where you are, be in respect of where you are. That is really what I learned in Hawaii, because it's very much taught there. It's taught to respect the land, the aina, and to be aloha. And so I kind of implement that into everywhere in my life, even here in Utah, right where I am right now. This is where I was born. But I have a new respect for, this is just where I am. I don't own Utah. I don't own where I am. This is the aina. This is the earth. And so a massive respect was found when I lived in Hawaii, because I had all these experiences of people who lived there, I can't think of the word right now. The people who originate from there, the Hawaiians, natives, that was the word I was thinking of. The natives, many of them would not accept me. Many of them did, but there was many of them who did not accept me, but I did not accept them. That is what I didn't realize. I would walk into this gas station sometimes, and there was the front lady who was native Hawaiian, and she would give me this dirty look every time I walked in. And other Hawaiians would walk in, and then she would greet them with a hello, how are you doing? And I just never got that, and I kind of I felt angry about it, but I more so just like, I did take it more actually saddening for a lot of the time being there. It was a time in my life where I felt so alone. I didn't have any friends, felt very disconnected from my family, and so I was just feeling rejected from everything, from the world. Even there was times where I even felt that God and the universe, the creator, life itself was rejecting me, just with bad things that would happen, or things just not going my way. And that was one part of the journey, but then I began to raise my vibration. I began to realize that I needed to cleanse both my mind and my body. And again, it was self-improvement all the way back to the beginning of my awakening. I began improving and loving myself. And while I started to do this in Hawaii, I met 3 angels on my path. They were physical human beings, but they were angels in my life. They were sent to me by the Creator to guide me in a certain way. And the only one I'm going to tell you about is Joe. He was the significant one. He was one of 3 people who told me I needed to go to Paia, which was a northern spot on the island of Maui, while I was in Wailuku before. Wailuku, on this big green mountain called the Iao. That's where I lived. And him and 3 people told me I needed to go to Paia. 2 of them just said, like, casually, like, oh, you would really fit in Paia. But then he said, no, you need to go to Paia. He told me I needed to go to Paia. And this Joe guy was hilarious. He was a great man. I enjoyed spending time with him. He was a spiritual teacher for me in the weirdest way. He was a crazy old man, but he was a spiritual teacher for me. And I believe that is how God, the Creator, sends us lessons and experiences in the most unique and almost funny of ways. This guy, he was a crazy. The way I use crazy is like thinking of my dad. My dad was crazy when we were kids. He would always do things that were against the rules and kind of crazy. And that's how this guy was. He didn't really follow the rules, but he was very kind. He was very loving. It wasn't in a hating way, but he was a little bit rebellious. And he taught me a lot about my masculine nature. He was always doing what he wanted. He said what he thought. He wasn't trying to be perfect all the time, and that was something that my ego really struggled with. Was trying to be perfect or trying to display perfection. And he didn't try to do that. He was very real, and I admired that about him. And after my experience with him, he disappeared. I didn't see him for a long time. I don't know what happened to him. He may have gone to jail because he needed to pass some kind of test, but he kept smoking weed. He wouldn't stop. He would always convince me too. I stopped eventually, like, giving it to him, but like he would tell me he has these tests and he's asking me to smoke my weed, and I'm like, bro, you're gonna fail your test. But I would let him. I wasn't his dad. I wasn't his controller, and I felt that he knew his limit, because that is what I would expect in myself, and he knew that too. He knew that I wasn't responsible for him, but who knows what happened to him. That happens a lot in Hawaii, where you just meet someone, you kind of have a time with them, and then you don't see him again. But after him, I did end up going to Paia, and I had the most divine experience. It's even hard for me to want to share it in this video because I'm condensing it so much more than it actually was. But that's why I'm also writing the book. And so I went to Paia, and a couple days before I went to Paia, I was picking up trash, and someone pulled over and gave me some flip-flops. And these flip-flops were huge. It was just, in my opinion, it was very apparent that there's no way these flip-flops would have even fit me. But the guy handed them to me, and I said, no, thank you. No, I'm just picking up trash. And then he was like, no, these are yours. And he made me take them. He didn't make me, but then after he said that, I'm like, okay, I'll take them. And then I was in Hawaii, or I went to Paia. And in Paia, I was there for a while. I walked around. Nothing really happened. I got kind of like bored or whatever, and I went to this graveyard. I found this graveyard at the edge of the city, and it was this like Japanese graveyard. So I walked into it. It looked very like interesting. It had this energy to it. Like I was like very absorbed to it. Like I couldn't have walked anywhere different. And I walked through the graveyard, and I got to kind of the back, and I turned around and I looked to where I once previously was when I walked into the graveyard, and there was a guy where I had been standing before, and we looked at each other, and without thought I walked towards him and he walked towards me, and then we met in the middle of the graveyard. And in the graveyard, he approached me, or I approached him. It was vice versa, simultaneously. And he says to me, he speaks first and says, "It seems the energy has brought us here." And that brought a smirk to my face. I couldn't help but feel like this excitement of energy that something was happening, something very important, something very powerful. And then I had just smiled, and then he said, "Over there," or something like that. Like, he just basically pointed towards, there was this beach edge at the end of the graveyard that I hadn't walked to yet. And so I said, okay, and we walked over to the beach edge, and over on the left, he says, "Look to the left." So I looked to the left, and these giant sea turtles, massive sea turtles. Kind of the reason I wear this necklace is ever since that moment, the turtle has been a very apparent animal in my life. I don't know if it's my spirit animal actually, but I believe that it was his spirit animal, and I was connecting with his energy. And while we were at the beach, we sat there for a second, and I didn't really know what to say. I didn't know what we were supposed to do. My program started kicking in, like, oh, I'm with someone. What do we have to do? We have to be doing something. So I was like, "Do you smoke weed?" And I asked him if he smoked weed, and he just goes something like, "No, that would not benefit me," or something like that. And he talked so consciously, I can't even recreate what he said unless I remember it specifically, which a lot of things I don't remember specifically what he said. But besides the very first thing that he said, when he said, "It seems the energy has brought us here," I was like, like, it was just like so direct, but like would sound crazy to anyone else, but like it was true. The energy had brought us there. And so then he just said, or he just started meditating. I don't even know if he said, "Let's meditate." I think he just started meditating. So I started meditating with him. It was about 10 minutes, 5 minutes I meditated, and I looked up, and I had heard him leave, but I didn't know where he went. And I looked up, and he was completely gone. He wasn't in the graveyard entirely. And he had left his flip-flops. They were these blue, crusty looking flip-flops, and I'm not even making fun of him or anyone or anything. These were very beaten down flip-flops, like he had them forever. Or at least worn them a lot. But I picked him up because I was like, okay, he's gone. He's not coming back, I guess. And I started walking, and I didn't see him anywhere in the city. He was gone. And so I just threw his flip-flops like in front of this building, and was like, maybe he'll see them. It's like, I don't know. And I had to hop back on the bus to get to where I was sleeping. I wasn't yet living in Paia. I was still living in the Green Mountain in Wailuku. But it was then after that experience that I was like, I got home later that day, which was in the mountain, and I saw the flip-flops sitting in my bag, and I was like, oh my god, I can give him these new flip-flops. Because one, his flip-flops were very beaten up, but I also felt bad that I just took them and wasn't able to give them back to him. And I was even having the thought of like, maybe I should just left the flip-flops. He would have came back for them later. So I didn't feel like obligated, but I felt like I wanted to. I wanted to find him again and to give him these flip-flops. And plus, I also, from very egoic reasons, I was like, wow, this guy was so mystical. This experience was so divine. So I kind of wanted more of his energy in a way. And so I ended up going back to Paia. And when I went back, I looked all around in the city for him again. Or not again, this time I was looking for him. Last time I just surrendered and I just let the experience happen and it kind of just came to me. But this time I was very much looking and I did not see him. I was there for way longer than I was last time, and I still couldn't find him. And so I went back to the bus stop, and I was kind of defeated. And I just started waiting for the bus to come. And as I was waiting for the bus to come, it must have gotten way delayed or something. Divinity at its finest. The bus being late, right when it needs to be late. I was sitting by these two girls, and I began having conversation with them. One of them was from Canada, one of them was from France. They were friends, and they had traveled to Maui. And as I was talking to them, I began just kind of surrendering. I was just like, okay, well, this is fun. I kind of was enjoying talking to them and expressing myself, telling them about all the things I have done and seen, and them as well. And it was then I saw the bus kind of far down. I knew it was going to take 1 or 2 more minutes. But then as I saw the bus, because I lifted my head and I saw the bus, as I saw the bus, I also at the exact same time saw this man. The man I had met in the graveyard. And he was across the street, and it was I completely just ignored everything else in reality, and I focused on him. And I ran through the street. A bunch of people honked at me. They're stupid, man. And I walked up to him, and the whole time before I thought I was going to talk to him again, and I was going to ask him who he was and all these things. But it was this moment of reverence when I walked to him. I knew I just needed to hand him the flip-flops and leave. I handed him the flip-flops, and he said, "Oh no, I can't take those." And I said, "No, these are yours." Exactly like the man who had given me the flip-flops had said. And then I left. I walked back to the bus station and got in the bus. It was then after that, I didn't see him for about another week. But I did move to the city of Paia. I decided to move there because I got robbed in Wailuku. I was feeling all this dark energy, something telling me to leave, but I ignored it, and then I got robbed. That's long story short, but even me getting robbed was this very spiritual experience. Even my friend Alex that I met in Hawaii, he was there when I got robbed. He was like, that was the most spiritual experience I've ever had. And it was while he was robbing me, I was in fear, and I was letting him be powerful over me. But then I surrendered to the spirit, to the life, and he naturally was gone. I repelled his darkness. And so it was then after that, though, that I knew I needed to leave Wailuku. My energy had shifted into needing a new experience, a new environment. And it was in Paia that I connected with this soul. I call him my guru. He was a teacher that will forever be in my heart and mind. Because he was an embodiment of consciousness, and he was reflecting that to me. And that was this third part or stage in my awakening, or it led into. Part 3 is where I'm at right now as well. I'm about to go into part 4. But he began to really deprogram me at a deep level. Really, one of the most spectacular things that happened, many spectacular things happened with him, but one of the most spectacular was how he really brought me to awareness of my own anger. And something that would happen is that he and this would happen simultaneously, was that an anger outburst would happen. Like, people would start yelling at each other or fighting. I saw fights. Lots of anger outbursts happened in my time in Hawaii. But something that interesting that happened is that every time I was in Paia and these anger outbursts happened, they would happen, and then my guru would walk by and he would see me. At first, I didn't even realize it. He pointed it out to me. He just straight up told me to me something. He said, "Do you ever realize that every time I see you, someone breaks out in anger?" And it just shook me because it had just happened as he said that to me. He pulled up to me, and that was the first thing he said, because people were fighting, yelling. He's like, "I never see that guy yell, and now he's yelling when I'm around you." And I was like, so like, it wasn't him saying he didn't want to be around me, but he was like, if you're gonna be around me, he's like, I'm gonna be true to you, and I'm gonna be like, you're attracting this experience, basically. Basically, he was not forcing me to deal with it, but he's like, if you're wanting to be around me, you have to deal and grow and heal from these things. And he would always tell me it wasn't his job to deprogram people. He really wouldn't ever deprogram me without my permission. He would actually only deprogram me unless I like basically pulled it out of him. I would ask him all these questions to where he would have to if he was going to answer my questions. But it was basically me deprogramming myself because I was asking the questions. I was allowing him to be my teacher. One of the most powerful things that he said to me, though, was he told me it was in great importance to align my chakras. And he told me which one of mine were closed at the time. And he knew. And I knew he was right. And he gave me quick insight. I see all these videos of how to open your root chakra, how to open your third eye. But his instructions were so simple. He would tell me, your root chakra is closed. He said, do you not trust the universe? Do you not trust God? Do you not trust your own capability? That would be his lesson about the root chakra, if he were to have a lesson. And the final thing that he left me with, and I look back at this and I see him, that he was an instruction manual. That is what a guru is, or a divine being on this earth. A sage is what he was. A Buddha, he was a Buddha. And he says, we were meditating and we were so connected. This is still one of the most powerful meditations I've ever had. We made it rain. I'd listened to a song earlier that day called Good Rain by Trevor Hall. And it says, good rain always comes down, or only good rain comes down when you love one another. I might have said that backwards, but that song was on my mind as it started to rain that night. And it didn't really rain that much in Paia. It rained a lot in Weluku, where I lived in the mountain, but in Paia it didn't rain as much, so this was kind of significant. And that night we meditated, and we would just look at each other and start laughing because we were in each other's minds. I knew he was reading my mind, and he knew I was reading his. We were sharing consciousness and energy, and I saw that the purpose was the light, and to be the light. And that's what he instructed me. He said it in the words, he said, I have a strong feeling that, or no, he didn't say that yet. He said, we are here to be the Christ. That was the way he would explain to me. He knew I had grown up Mormon. He knew that Christ was one of the main enlightened figures that I had learned from. And so I think that's why he used that example. But he said Christ. He said, we are here to be the Christ. And that he had a strong feeling that there was this vision or this dream. of oneness, of sameness, and that we are all our own unique individual here, but there is this same dream. And the way that I view what he was speaking of is heaven on earth, and that we are here to create heaven on earth, to be heaven on earth. And this is the beingness of oneness, to be one with everything and everyone, to be one with yourself. And that is the purpose of life. That's not something outside of us at all. The purpose of life is right here. And the last two things that happened was he told me that it doesn't matter what we do here. That the world, the universe, the cosmos will figure itself out regardless. But that I get to choose my being in this world. But as we meditated, and one of the last things he told me was, he just goes, out of his meditation, he goes, wow, you are a conduit of something great. And I told him that I knew I was. And he said, I did not know how aware you were of the greatness you behold, because I didn't always show it. And so then this is why I asked him this question, is because I felt, I wondered if it was okay to know I was great, because I knew I was great. I know I am great. And so I asked him, I said, is it okay to know that I am great? And he said, I believe it is why we are here. And I believe him. I believe we are here to discover our power and our purpose. And that is what I am learning to embody now as I have moved back to Utah. I am shortly moving to Sedona. The journey continues. But wherever you are in your journey, you are where you are meant to be. And the answer is to surrender to it and to be the light, to find the light in yourself so that you can be the light and so that you can share the light. And to be the light is to be the Christ, to be the example to others. And that is what a guru is. A guru is not a drill sergeant. A guru is a teacher by example. An instructor by example. And I'm so grateful to have met so many wonderful souls, angels, and guidance in my life. And I'm happy that I have the opportunity and platform to share it to you guys. So thank you for watching this video, if you did. You obviously did if you're watching this. So you did it. But I leave you with all the love, light, and respect. And I hope that you know it's all within you. I'll see you later.